Hello class, today we are going to talk about the qualities of craft. And craft, we're talking about several different qualities. Remember, craft is art that's made for a purpose. So, first of all, there's formal qualities. Formal qualities are aesthetic qualities. In other words, you're looking at craft not as to see if it works or not, but rather looking at it just to see if it's beautiful, how it works as a piece of art, and you don't really need to know the meaning behind it or what it's supposed to do. You just appreciate it for how it looks. Physical qualities, which we're going to focus on today, is things like the medium or what it's made out of, technique, which is how it's made, and craftsmanship, which is how well it's made. Contextual qualities include things like content, which is the meaning. Context is the background information. Appropriation and assimilation are a little trickier, but those are kind of how it connects into our culture. When you look at the picture there of the jar, you can probably guess what part of the world it's from, partially because of the way the jar itself is designed and then the decoration on it. It has what looks to be Asian language written in ink, and the jar itself looks to be very well made and capped and obviously has a purpose, but it's also designed to be very attractive too. So talking about formal qualities of craft as art, first of all, this word aesthetics keeps coming up. That's kind of a tricky word. And aesthetics is your opinion or your culture's opinion of beauty, how something looks. And aesthetics and formal qualities include some formal art things, like line, shape, form, space, color, texture, value, and art principles, which are the rules for composition of art. Those are things that we study in the visual arts classes, Art 1 and above. But when you're looking at a piece of craft and you don't understand what it's supposed to do, then they could look at the picture and say, oh, there's horizontal lines of alternating blue and gold. Okay? So that's kind of an abstract way to talk about it. Now, most of you could probably identify who it is here in the picture. That is King Tut. And you also probably know from other classes that you're looking at one of his burial masks. They actually had layers of these. So you would have the mummy, which is the body that is wrapped up in linen cloth. And then they have different layers of masks. This would be the first one that goes on, and it fits very tightly. It's actually molded over his face right after he dyed. The gold, which is a soft leaf, was pressed down to get those exact kind of features. But there's a lot you can learn about him by looking at the mask. First of all is what kind of ethnic group and background he came from. And start thinking about, he was a pharaoh in Egypt. Egypt is kind of on the Middle Eastern side of Africa, but it is on the African continent. King Tut himself had a lot of ethnic African features. If you look at his face and the shape of his cheekbones and his jawline and his nose and lips and eyes and everything. A while ago, before people really, were more enlightened, they just assumed that if you studied about somebody, they looked exactly like you, regardless of where in the world they came from. But no. So that's an important thing to realize, is that this person was an individual. All right, looking at him a little further, you see, first of all, that on his chin, he has a beard. And that beard was, it actually screws off and on. And inside it has some herbs and things like that. Beards in Egypt were a sign of nobility and royalty and leadership, and both men and women wore them. And they were made out of plaited hair, and it was usually horsehair or other long animal hair, because humans shaved. Egypt is very hot, dry, equatorial desert kind of country. And as you know, when you have like a lot of hair and it's a very hot environment, the hair holds the heat in and can make you uncomfortable. So in Egypt, their aesthetic was that everybody, men and women, shaved head to toe, no hair, no eyebrows, no anything else. And so, of course, there was no beards, but they wore these ceremonial beards that they would attach to the man or woman who was in leadership at the time. So moving up from the beard to the eyes and the eyebrows were drawn on using kohl. That's Khol, which is a mixture of charcoal and grease. And then the eyes, you notice he has on a lot of eyeliner. And kohl is still made, is still used for eyeliner. Now, the reason why they had eyeliner on, as well as aesthetic and beauty, was the same reason that football players put the black streaks under their eyes. It helps to cut the glare from the sun and helps you to see better. So if you're living in a very hot, bright desert environment with a lot of white reflective sand and whatnot, there's a lot of glare, and that helps you. Now, looking at his ears, if you notice his earlobes, they are stretched and gauged. Gauging the ears, which was very trendy a few years ago. Gauging the ears is a worldwide kind of symbol of nobility that shows up in cultures all across the world. It showed up in the Egyptian pharaohs. It shows up in the Buddhas of Asia. It shows up in the rulers of the Aztec and Mayans in South America, and in European nobility as well. So his ears are gauged. His whole face is gold. Gold is precious, but not only is it precious, but in their culture, the pharaoh was considered to be the son of the sun, in the sky. So his face is gold, and that's where those gold stripes come from. On his kind of hat thing, the gold and blue stripes, the gold is the sun rays that come up, and then the blue is the water from the Nile, the great rivers. And then at the top of his headpiece, there is a cobra and a vulture, which were the symbols of the two parts of the kingdom that were under his rule. And King Tut was a pretty young guy when he died. He was like 16, 17. So anyway, that's the craft of it, because that piece was not made just to look attractive and be pretty, that we can look at it and say, yeah, that's cool, that's pretty. But it served the purpose of the burial ritual, and then it had all that meaning and symbolism in there. And that's why we study all this other stuff along with crafts, so that you know those things. Okay, so looking at these aesthetically, if you're talking just about their artistic qualities, these are carved. They're carved with the pattern of grape leaves. They're made out of wood. It's a very good job. But they are craft. They're not just art. These are a set of artificial legs that are made for, actually, she's a runway model and who lost her lower legs in an accident. So she has a whole closet, like we would of shoes. She has a closet of handmade artificial legs so that she can continue working as a runway model. Physical properties of craft. We're going to talk about medium, which is the materials. Media, the action of making craft. Technique is your method. Process is step-by-step directions, and craftsmanship is the technical skill that you use. When you are looking at this image over here, this is a Greek vase from a long time ago. And not only can you look at it and guess that it is made out of clay, which is then cooked to create ceramic or glass. It's very well made. It has 2 handles. It will hold the liquid. And it's also decorated. But it's not just a pattern. It's decorated with the story of the Minotaur. And so it also served as entertainment. While this would be sitting on a table or the kitchen or wherever, and somebody who did not know the story would say, well, what was that about? And they would say, okay, well, this is what that's about, and be able to tell the story. And if you don't know the story of the Minotaur, the hero in the middle, Theseus, was charged, found out about this country that was really struggling with a monster, and the monster lived underground in a maze. And the monster was the Minotaur, bullhead, human body. And the Minotaur demanded a sacrifice every so often. And the sacrifice was they had to round up their male and female virgins and send them down into the maze. And the Minotaur would do whatever with them and then kill them and eat them. And many heroes tried to kill this beast, and nobody was successful. So, our hero here, when he went down there, he was smart because he knew that you have a couple different challenges. Not only do you have to find and kill the monster, but you also have to not get lost in the maze. So he took a giant ball of yarn with him, tied it at the beginning, and unstrung it as he went through the maze, and found the Minotaur and killed him, and then followed the yarn back out. Pretty clever. Okay, so medium is what you make something out of. This is clay in its natural state. We have this type of clay around here. It's blue clay. It's kind of a more brittle clay, and you can see it has that kind of bluish cast to it. Clay is decayed granite that washes down from the mountains and then is mixed with other sediment and things in the river and has to be cleaned. But it's dug out of riverbanks, just like you see here. So that's the medium. The material is clay. The media is the act of creation. So it's what you do. In this case, the artist is sculpting clay. And the different techniques we'll talk about, but media is always what you're doing. You're sculpting, you're painting, you're drawing, you're singing, you're carving. Technique is the method of creation. It's how you're doing it. So before the last slide, he was sculpting it by hand. In this case, they're throwing clay on a wheel to make a pot. And then process is your step-by-step directions. So you do this first, and then you do this, and then you do this. In this case, you have to dig up the clay, and then you have to wash it and wedge it, which is pounding it to get out all the air. And then they form the pot, and then that has to dry, and then you have to cook it in the kiln so it becomes ceramic. Process is important for all crafts because if you leave out a step, it doesn't work. Something happens. With clay, if you leave out that second step where you wedge it, which is pounding it to get the air out of, and you go to bake it, it will explode, literally, because the air will expand in the hot oven and kapow! Likewise, with everything we do in here, following the directions is important if you want to get to the end result. And I'll teach you how to make it step by step in one way. And then after you learn the right way to make it, then you can start adding on your individual touches. And craftsmanship itself is technical skill. It's the quality of your construction. Looking here, you have 2 clay pots from the same place and the same age. They're both from Greece again, and both the same time period. But you can tell that even discounting those breaks on the left side pot, the tan pot, which happened because it was old, you can tell there's a difference in craftsmanship. If you look at the pot on the left, the tan pot, it's large, but if you look carefully at the bottom and the handles, it's not even. Everything isn't centered, it's not balanced, it's not decorated, it's not glazed, it's just plain. And the handles are a little bit small for your hand to really hold. So that's an example of a pot that during its time actually worked. It was a utilitarian, or just its job was to hold stuff, and that was it. It didn't have to look good. It didn't have to be that well made. It just had to hold whatever it was holding for that length of time. Compare that to the pot on the right, the black one that has the double spouts on the top. Not only is that a lot more difficult to make, to create structurally, but that's kind of an advanced thought. It was used for pouring things like wine, and the reason why it has the 2 spouts is when you tip it, air goes in one side, and then the wine pours smoothly out of the other. It doesn't splash around, and it's a controlled stream rather than an uncontrolled stream. And then you have the middle part that will help you hold it while you're pouring. The surface itself is burnished. That means the clay was rubbed by hand really hard with a stone until it became shiny like that. So that has a much higher level of craftsmanship and would be much more valuable during the time that it was made. So now you have an assignment. And this is kind of a creative assignment, and it has 2 parts to it. And it's so you think about process and design. So for this assignment, you're going to need your Chromebook, and then you can use either traditional drawing materials like paper, pen and pencil, colored pencils, what have you, or you could use digital drawing materials if you prefer that. So the first part, you are a cake designer. Now, the first thing I want you to do is write down the directions for how to bake a cake. So include your list of ingredients and write down your step-by-step directions. Even if you have never made a cake before, just write down what you think needs to happen in order to turn from ingredients to a finished cake. And if you are a baker and have baked before, write down what you know, but I don't want you to look it up. I don't want you to Google it. I don't want you to get out a recipe book or ask mom or whatever. I want you to do it right out of your head. And we're going to talk about these later. But from memory, and yes, you can use a box cake mix if you want to, if you don't want to do the whole thing from scratch. That's fine. But just from memory, write down step by step how you think you would make a cake. Okay? Now the next part is your drawing directions, because you're going to draw and design your cake. Your cake is not just any cake though. It has a theme. You're going to use the random theme generator to get your theme and your colors. It's linked here in the slideshow. It's also linked on Classroom. If it's not working on your Chromebook for some reason, pull it up on a cell phone or a different device. Now you can keep clicking the random generator until you get something that you think is fun. And I will show you how that works in a minute. And then you are going to draw the cake based on your theme. And remember that cakes don't have to be round. They can be almost any shape. You can carve cakes. You can suspend cakes. And over on the right, you see one of the Great British Baking Show cakes, which is Hamish the dog. It looks like his little dog. And then you're going to turn in a Google Doc that has your written directions and the 3-word theme from the generator. And I'm going to go back and show you that. And then a photograph of your cake drawing. And over on the right, we have an optical illusion Doritos cake that before it was cut just looked like a Doritos bag laying on a table. But no, surprise, it's actually cake. Okay, so for the theme generator, click on it. And as soon as you hit it, it will show up a theme. So my theme is gemstones, my secondary theme is revolutionary, and my third theme is magic. So I might make a cake with a theme of gemstones, jewels that are magical and that can cause a change or cause a revolution. Oh, like the crown jewels of Russia. That was and the Fabergé eggs that were part of the Russian Revolution. And then I have some colors below for inspiration. But if you don't like this theme, click on Generate Theme. Ooh, this one, a potion with ocean and bubbles. So a potion is like a magical liquid, and so I'm seeing, bubbles in that potion, and it might be ocean colored, and then it might have these yellow and golds around it. There's glimmer, spirit, melody, vines, masked. Okay, this is your chance to show me how creative you are. Don't stress out if you can draw or not. Just do your best. I'm not looking at so much at your drawing skill, though I always like that. But I'm looking at how your mind works and how you're able to put things together and be creative, okay? And then upload it to Classroom. Can't wait to see them. That's it.